The wind swept softly through the dusty main street of Willow Creek. As the last stagecoach pulled away in a cloud of ochre dust, its wooden wheels clattering over the hard earth like the closing notes of a sad song, she stood there, the woman in blue, clutching the worn leather strap of her satchel as if holding on to the last piece of hope she had left. Her eyes shimmered with tears that caught the evening light, turning her pain into something almost sacred. The cowboy watched her from across the street, his hat tilted low, his jaw set beneath the shadow of a fading sun. He had seen heartbreak before, out on the frontier. Everyone carried ghosts. But there was something about this woman that stopped him cold. Maybe it was the way she stood tall even as her world was falling apart. Or maybe it was the way her tears didn't beg for pity. They just fell silent and strong. The stagecoach disappeared over the ridge, taking with it her last chance to leave this forgotten town. The driver hadn't even looked back. She had missed it by seconds. And now she was stranded in a place where strangers' eyes lingered too long, and kindness was in short supply. The cowboy crossed the street slowly, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. Every step echoed in the quiet, heavy, deliberate, as if each footfall carried a choice. When he stopped in front of her, the air between them felt charged, alive with something neither of them understood yet. Her eyes lifted to meet his, and for a heartbeat the whole world held still. "You're late," he said softly, the ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "They left without me. Looks that way." His tone was calm, almost gentle. "Where were you headed?" "Anywhere but here," she whispered, and in those 3 words, he heard the story of 1,000 lonely miles. Her dress was simple but clean, her hair loosely braided and her hands rough from work clutched that satchel like it carried her whole life. He looked down the empty road where the coach had gone, then back at her. "Not much out there except more dust and disappointment," he said. "You travel alone." She hesitated, then nodded. "No one waiting for me." The cowboy adjusted his hat, his eyes thoughtful. "Then maybe it's a good thing you missed that ride." She frowned, confused. "Why?" "Because sometimes," he said quietly, "the right road don't start with a stagecoach." For a long moment, neither spoke. The sun dipped lower, painting the town in golden fire, and a distant coyote's cry echoed through the canyon. The woman wiped her tears and looked away. "You don't even know me," she said. "Maybe not," he replied, "but I know what it's like to have nowhere to go." His voice carried a weight, the kind that only comes from living too long with silence. He glanced at his horse tied by the post, a sturdy bay with a black mane and a saddle that had seen better days. Then he turned back to her. "Ride with me," he said, simply. She blinked, unsure she heard him right. "What?" "You need to get somewhere safe. The desert ain't kind to those who walk it alone. I don't even know your name." "Most folks don't," he said, offering the faintest smile. "But if you're willing, I'll get you where you need to go." She studied him for a long time. The lines of his face, the dust on his coat, the quiet steadiness in his eyes. Something about him felt dangerous, but not in the way that frightened her. He looked like someone who'd seen too much of life and decided to protect what little goodness was left in it. Slowly, she nodded. "All right," she said softly. "I'll ride." He tipped his hat slightly, a gesture both humble and protective. "Then let's not waste daylight." He took her satchel, tied it to the saddle, and offered her his hand. She hesitated only a moment before taking it. His grip was firm, warm, reassuring, the kind of touch that said, "You're safe now." When she climbed up behind him, the scent of leather and dust filled her lungs, and for the first time in days, she let herself breathe. As they started down the long dirt road, the town grew smaller behind them, swallowed by the evening light. She didn't ask where they were going, and he didn't say. For now, it was enough to just move forward. The sky stretched wide above them, painted in shades of fire and violet, and the sound of the horse's hooves beat a slow, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat, like a promise. After a while, she spoke again, her voice barely above the wind. "Why are you helping me?" He looked straight ahead. "Because once," he said, "someone helped me when I didn't deserve it. Guess I'm just paying that debt forward." Her eyes softened, and though she didn't reply, a small smile tugged at her lips. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, but for the first time it didn't feel so empty. The cowboy's shoulders were strong and steady in front of her, and as the horizon burned with the last light of day, she felt something flicker in her chest, a fragile, unfamiliar hope. He guided the horse up a small ridge, and from the top, the valley below shimmered in gold. "We'll make camp near the creek," he said. "It's quiet there, safe." She nodded, trusting his word without knowing why. When they stopped, he built a small fire while she sat by the creek, washing her face in the cool water. The reflection that looked back at her was still tired, still bruised by life, but now it carried a spark, and faint but real. He watched her from across the flames, saying nothing. The fire crackled between them, painting their faces in warm light. "So you look like you've lost something," he said softly. She met his gaze. "I did, but maybe not everything." He smiled, a rare, fleeting thing. "Then maybe that's enough to start again." The night settled around them. The stars thick and close, and for the first time in a long time she didn't feel alone. The cowboy leaned back against his saddle, his hat tipped low, the faint glimmer of peace crossing his face. Tomorrow would bring questions, maybe danger, maybe even heartbreak, but tonight there was quiet, there was warmth, and there was the strange beginning of something neither could yet name. And as the wind whispered through the desert grass, she looked at him, the man who stopped when no one else did, and silently wondered what stories lived behind those steady eyes. Somewhere in the distance, a lone coyote called, and the cowboy opened one eye, meeting her gaze through the firelight. "You'll be all right now," he said. And for the first time in forever, she believed it. If you felt every word of this story and want to know what happens next, make sure to subscribe, because Chapter 2 will take you deeper into their journey, where fate and love ride side by side under the western sun. The sun rose slow over the horizon, spilling gold across the silent desert, and the sound of the creek whispered softly in the morning chill. She awoke to the smell of coffee and wood smoke, blinking as the light danced across the cowboy's face. He sat by the fire, hat low, stirring the tin pot with quiet patience. His movements were deliberate, calm, like a man who had learned to listen to the rhythm of the land. She sat up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You've been up long?" she asked softly. "A while," he said without looking up. "Old habits die hard." She smiled faintly. "You always travel alone?" He paused, then nodded. "Easier that way. No one to lose." She looked into the fire, the crackle filling the silence. "That's a lonely way to live." He finally looked at her, eyes steady. "Ain't all bad. Loneliness don't betray you." His words carried a truth that made her heart ache, not just for him, but for herself. She had known loss too, the kind that leaves shadows even in the brightest light. She reached for the tin cup he handed her and took a sip, the bitter warmth grounding her in a way she hadn't felt in years. By the time they packed up and mounted the horse, the desert was alive with color. Sagebrush shimmered silver in the wind, and the far-off mountains glowed soft and blue. They rode in silence for a while, the horse's steady rhythm their only sound. "Where are we headed?" she finally asked. "There's a town 2 days' ride west," he said. "Quiet place. Folks mind their own business. You can rest there, start fresh if you want." She studied him. "And you?" "Don't know yet," he replied. "Maybe I'll keep riding." His voice was flat, but something flickered behind it, a weight she couldn't name. After a while, she said softly, "You don't have to run forever." He turned his head slightly, meeting her eyes. "Sometimes running is all a man knows how to do." As the day wore on, the heat pressed heavy, and the silence between them grew comfortable. She watched the way he moved, cautious, deliberate, always scanning the horizon. He wasn't just a drifter. He was a man who'd seen danger and learned to live one heartbeat ahead of it. Near midday, they stopped by a small spring, letting the horse drink. He filled her canteen and sat beside her under a mesquite tree. "So what's your story?" he asked gently. She looked down at her hands. "My husband died last winter," she said quietly. "He was sick for months. I tried to save him, but—" Her voice trailed off, the pain still raw. "After that, I couldn't stay. The farm wasn't ours anymore. And the folks in town looked at me like I was a ghost." He listened without interrupting, his eyes soft. "You did what you had to," he said finally. Ain't no shame in leaving behind what's already gone. She looked up at him. And you? What are you running from? He gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. Let's just say I made enemies once. Folks who don't forgive easy, been right in ever since. So you're a wanted man? Not anymore, he said. At least not in the way that matters. They rode again as the sun began to sink, painting long shadows over the sand. When they reached the edge of a canyon, he stopped. We'll camp here tonight, he said. As they set up, she watched him move around the firelight. Quiet. Sure, every motion steady as the wind. She realized she trusted him, though she didn't know why. Maybe it was the way he never asked for anything. Maybe it was how he looked at her, not like a burden, but like someone worth protecting. When the fire burned low, she asked softly, "Do you ever miss anyone?" He looked into the flames. "Yeah," he said after a long pause. "A woman once. Years back. I left her behind thinking I was doing her a favor. Turns out some ghosts don't stay gone." She nodded, feeling the ache in his words. Maybe some ghosts are meant to find their way back. The night deepened, stars glittering like cold fire above them. She wrapped her shawl tighter and leaned back against a rock. The air was cool, clean, endless. After a while, she spoke again. "You know," she said softly, "when that stage left without me, I thought I'd lost my last chance to start over." He glanced at her. "Funny thing about chances," he said. "They got a way of finding folks when they least expect it." She smiled faintly, her eyes glimmering in the firelight. "And what about you? Maybe I'm your second chance." He chuckled quietly. "You sound awful sure of that." "Maybe I am." Morning came with a storm brewing on the horizon. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, and the air smelled of rain and dust. They pushed on through the rising wind, the horse struggling against the gusts. Lightning flashed across the open sky, and thunder rumbled like cannon fire. "We need shelter," he shouted over the wind. They found a small abandoned shack near the edge of the valley and ducked inside just as the rain came down in sheets. She sank onto the floor, soaked and shivering. He lit a small fire, the flames flickering weakly. The roof leaked, the walls groaned, but it was shelter. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded. "Sass eater, just cold." He took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "There," he said. "Better." She looked up at him, eyes wide. "You didn't have to." "Didn't have to watch you cry neither," he said softly. "But here we are." The words hung between them, heavy and true. Outside, the storm raged, but inside the world had narrowed to the warmth of the fire and the space between them. She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing his hand. "You could have left me there," she whispered. "Would have been easier." He shook his head. "Maybe, but easy don't always mean right." The fire crackled, and for a moment they just looked at each other, two souls caught in the storm. When she leaned closer, he didn't pull away. The storm howled outside, but inside everything was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like the world holding its breath. When the thunder rolled away and the first light of dawn crept in, they were still sitting there side by side. The fire reduced to embers. They rode on once the skies cleared, and as they crested the final ridge, the town came into view, small, peaceful, tucked between the hills. "There it is," he said. "Safe enough place for you to start again." She looked at it, then at him. "What about you?" He hesitated. "I was never much for staying put." She frowned. "You're just going to leave?" He smiled faintly. "You got a life to build." "I'd just be in the way." "That's not true," she said, her voice breaking. "You're the reason I made it this far." He looked away, his throat tight. "Then I did what I set out to do." She dismounted slowly, her heart heavy. "Will I see you again?" He adjusted his hat, the wind tugging at his coat. "If the trail's kind." She watched him turn his horse and start down the road, the dust swirling around him. But before he disappeared over the ridge, he stopped, looked back, and tipped his hat. "Ride with me," he called softly, his voice carrying over the wind. Her breath caught, the world narrowing to that one moment. Without thinking, she ran to her horse, swung up into the saddle, and galloped after him. The two of them rode side by side into the open land, the past falling away behind them. The horizon stretched wide, full of promise, and for the first time, neither was running. They were finally free. If this story touched your heart and you believe in second chances, hit that subscribe button and ride with us for more stories that stir the soul and light the fire of hope